Hello, my name is Camilla and I am 35 years old. I built a tech startup from nothing and turned it into something real. This kind of business allows me to take a week off for Thanksgiving without worrying that everything will collapse. I had been waiting for this trip for months. A week alone in my mountain cabin in Aspen, time by the fireplace with books and wine. For the first time in a long while, I was not going to think about work. I have a younger sister named Paula. She is 27, married to Jake. Many years ago, when I still trusted her, I gave her a spare set of keys to my Aspen house. I told her she could use them, but on one condition. She had to let me know first. That was the rule. Always inform me if you plan to be there. On Wednesday afternoon, I loaded up the car and drove to Aspen. The trip from Denver took about 4 hours. I was tired, wanting to disconnect and sink into the silence. As I pulled up to the house, I saw Paula's SUV parked in the driveway, the SUV I paid for. Another car, unfamiliar to me, was parked next to it. My stomach tightened with a sense of foreboding. She hadn't called, hadn't texted, hadn't asked for permission. I got out and walked to the front door. Voices, laughter, and music were coming from inside. I unlocked the door and entered. The living room was crowded with people. 8 individuals sitting as if they had always owned the place. Jake with his parents, his brother with his fiancée, and a couple of distant relatives I had seen once or twice at the wedding. The dining table was littered with turkey bones, half-eaten pumpkin pie, empty wine bottles, and dirty dishes. Coats were thrown over chairs. No one had hung them in the hallway. Above the fireplace where my photograph usually hung, a portrait of Paula was now displayed. She had replaced me. Everyone turned and stared at me as if I were the stranger. Jake's mother was the first to stand up. "Camilla, we didn't expect to see you. Paula said you were on a business trip." I looked at her as she continued, her tone accusatory. "You know, young people these days are so irresponsible. You should warn people before just showing up at a house." How strange. She came to my house and scolded me for being impolite. Before I could respond, Paula walked out of the kitchen with a bottle of wine and a cheese platter. Seeing me, she frowned. "What are you doing here?" she said sharply. I replied firmly, "What am I doing here? This is my house." She laughed, a harsh, cold laugh. "Your house? Please. A lonely parasite like you has no business here. It's my house now. Leave or I'll call the police." My hands were trembling. I wanted to scream, but I tried not to raise my voice. "This house belongs to me, Paula, not you. I didn't give it to anyone. I never went away." Jake's father stood up, confused. "Wait, Paula told us you were on a 6-month business trip in Asia. She said you let them use the house while you were away." It turned out she had lied to the family, making them think I had agreed. I turned to Paula and said, "You're lying." She grabbed her phone from the table and started dialing. "That's it. I'm calling 911. You broke into our house and are ruining our Thanksgiving." "Go ahead, call," I thought, feeling the heat of anger rise alongside the emptiness of betrayal. I walked through the rooms. The bedrooms were a mess. Clothes strewn about, beds unmade, strangers' belongings everywhere. In the bathroom, wet towels were piled on the floor. Their presence felt like a second skin, careless and brazen. They had been living here for several days, maybe longer, with no thought for order. In this house, where the walls knew my footsteps and my habits, now only foreign imprints remained. I remembered coming here with my mother before, how the corners held our quiet rituals. Abandoned books, the smell of old pages and pine branches, the traces of her eyelashes on my favorite armchair. All of it was foreign now. Sadness. I returned to the living room just as 2 police officers appeared at the doorstep. They knocked, and Jake let them in. Paula immediately, with a face full of artificial outrage, spoke up. "Officers, this woman broke into my home. She's harassing us. She's trying to ruin our holiday." I remained calm, though my heart was beating an anxious rhythm somewhere under my ribs. My voice was even, almost formal. "Officers, my name is Camilla Morrison. This house belongs to me. This is my sister Paula, and all these people are here without my permission." One of the officers nodded, urging me to continue. I walked to the door where I had left my briefcase, pulled out a folder of documents, sturdy leather, the smell of paper and ink, familiar and reliable. I laid the deed, tax payment receipts, and my driver's license on the table. I handed them to the nearest officer. "These are fake!" Paula shrieked, her voice laced with fear, the kind she always hid beneath a mask of confidence. "She's lying!" The officer didn't respond. He examined the papers carefully, then got on his radio, checking with the database. The room became so quiet you could hear the embers crackling in the fireplace. After a minute, he turned to the group, and his voice sounded like a verdict. "Ma'am, these documents are legitimate. This house belongs to Camilla Morrison. Everyone else here is present unlawfully." Jake's mother gasped, turned red to the tips of her ears, and spun towards her son. "You said she allowed it. Now we could all be arrested because of you and your lying wife." Jake, pale, averted his eyes. The officer turned to me. "Do you wish to press charges for unlawful entry?" I shook my head. "No, I just want them to leave my house immediately." Paula burst into tears, streams running down her face, but there was no remorse in them, only self-pity. "We're family. We have a right to be here," the officer replied calmly, almost softly. "Family relation does not grant the right to unlawful entry. Colorado state law. You all need to leave." I took out my phone, opened the Chase Bank app. My hands were no longer shaking. I was tired of being the good sister, the one who always paid for everyone and got only lies and ingratitude in return. "Paula," I said loudly, so everyone in the room could hear, "you live in an apartment in Denver. I pay $2,500 a month for it. You've been living there, in Rentry, for 3 years. Paula stopped crying, as if someone had turned off a tap, and stared at me with wide eyes. "Today it ends," I said. "If you want to keep living there, you'll have to pay for it yourself." I pressed a few buttons, and the automatic payment was canceled right before everyone's eyes. Then I turned to Jake. He stood with his head down, avoiding my gaze. "Jake, I was going to talk to your boss about a promotion for you. You know Richard, right? He's a friend of mine. I got you that job at his company asking for a favor." Jake turned even paler, as if the last of his blood had been drained. "That's all canceled now. You can keep the job, but don't expect any more support or recommendations from me." I returned to my phone screen, opened the list of automatic payments, found the one for Paula's SUV, the one currently parked in my driveway, the one she had begged me to buy, insisting they needed it to drive Jake's parents to doctor's appointments. "I've been paying $600 a month for almost 2 years," I said. "That payment is also canceled." Paula gasped. "You can't." "I just did." The air in the living room grew thick, heavy with humiliation and silent shame. "Over the past few years," I continued, "I've spent over $120,000 on you. The apartment, the car, groceries, everything. And I'm not spending another cent." I turned to the officer. "I want everyone to leave my house immediately." The policeman nodded, his face remaining impassive. "If any of you have been drinking," he said, "you are not permitted to drive. Colorado law. I will arrest anyone I catch driving under the influence." Jake's father stepped forward. "I'm sober. I'll take half of them." Jake's brother's fiancée raised her hand. "I'm sober too. I'll take the rest." Paula suddenly rushed towards me, tears flowing again as if trying to wash away what had happened. "Camilla, please, you can't do this. We're sisters." The officer stepped between us. "Ma'am, if you do not leave voluntarily, I will have to arrest you for obstructing justice." Everyone started gathering their things. Jackets, bags, leftover pie, empty bottles. They moved quickly, as if trying to disappear as soon as possible. No one looked me in the eye. Jake's mother kept muttering about being humiliated, and his father yelled at his son, calling him an irresponsible fool. Within 20 minutes, everything was quiet. 2 cars pulled out of the driveway, disappearing into the darkness of the mountain road. The police officers also left, making sure it was all over. I stood in the doorway and watched the taillights of their cars vanish among the pines. The air was frosty, clean, smelling of smoke and pine needles. Silence remained in the house, heavy but honest, like after a long illness when you suddenly realize you can breathe deeply again. Then I closed the door, turned the key in the lock, and listened to the sound of the bolt. Dry, decisive, like a period at the end of a long, painful sentence. Silence settled in the house, but it wasn't a cozy silence. It was thick, tangible, full of traces of foreign presence. I surveyed the mess left after their hasty departure. The house was trashed, as if a hurricane of indifference and disrespect had swept through. Dirty dishes were everywhere, carelessly discarded napkins, food scraps on the floor, pieces of bread stuck to the carpet, and puddles of spilled wine. Empty bottles stood in a neat row on the kitchen counter, like a monument to their revelry. On the sofa, stains from wine, from food, from foreign bodies, as if the house itself had absorbed their carelessness. I walked into the bathroom and froze. Wet towels lay on the floor. Footprints of bare feet led to the door. The mirror was fogged. Someone else's makeup was on the sink. Everything they had touched was soiled, not just the things, but with a sense of indifference to what wasn't theirs. I sat on the sofa trying to avoid the dirty stains and sat still for a long time, as if listening to echoes of the past. Thoughts, one after another, rose from the depths of memory. I thought about the last 10 years, a whole lifetime spent trying to save someone who didn't want to be saved. After our parents died, I was 25, and Paula was only 17. She was still in high school, fragile, confused, with eyes reflecting fear of the future. I took her in without a second thought. She was my younger sister, part of the family, and I felt obligated to care for her. It seemed natural then. I paid for everything: food, clothes, phone, textbooks. I thought I was doing the right thing, that love was measured by sacrifice. When she graduated, I paid for her college. All her years of study were on my dime, and I believe she appreciated it. I thought one day she would stand on her own feet, start working, build her life. But instead of gratitude came laziness, justified by phrases about a creative nature. She called herself an artist, a writer, a person not made for routine. In reality, she just lived with me, slept until noon and spent my money, convinced I owed it to her. I endured, hoping things would change. Then Jake appeared. I was happy at first. I thought she had found someone who would help her grow up. They got married, rented a place, moved out. I genuinely breathed a sigh of relief, but the happiness didn't last long. A few months later, Paula came back. She said she and Jake were having temporary rental difficulties, that they needed help for just a few months. I agreed. $2,500 a month. 6 months. A year at most, I told myself. 3 years passed. 3 years I paid their rent while they lived as if nothing was wrong, throwing parties, traveling, while I worked 80 hours a week. And then came the car. I remember her bursting into my office, in tears, with a trembling voice telling me that Jake's parents were sick, that they needed to go to the doctor frequently. She begged for help, said they desperately needed a reliable car because Jake couldn't afford one himself. I believed her again. Bought a brand new SUV for $35,000, took out a loan, paid $600 a month for 2 years straight. And today I found out that this SUV had brought their whole crew here, to my house, for an illegal, thoughtless vacation. I sat and remembered Jake. I once thought he would balance Paula, teach her responsibility, make her an adult, but he turned out to be the same soft, spineless parasite, willing to live off others to avoid work. He and she were one, created from whims and self-deception. They both believed they were entitled to everything simply because they wanted it. I closed my eyes, and her face, contorted with anger from when I entered tonight, surfaced in my memory. She called me a parasite, a lonely leech, and it wasn't a slip of the tongue, not a burst of anger in a drunken argument. It was what she had thought of me all this time, about the person who paid for her education, roof over her head, car, who had been there for 10 years. She called me a parasite. She was never grateful, not once. Her life was a chain of demands, complaints, manipulations. She took and took and took, as if it were natural, as if I owed her something. And now she was accusing me of daring to show up in my own house. I sat on that dirty sofa until midnight, immersed in silence and my own thoughts. Then I got up, fetched trash bags, and started cleaning. Plates, bottles, napkins, stains on the floor. It all went into plastic bags along with the remnants of the past life. The work took several hours. When I finished, it was almost 4 a.m. I collapsed onto the cleaned sofa, feeling weak but also a strange relief, as if I had cleansed not just the house, but myself of an old role. I fell asleep instantly and woke up around 10. The first thing I did was open my laptop and find a locksmith in the area. Found one willing to come the same day. He changed all the locks, installed new deadbolts, and handed me a shiny set of keys. While he worked, I sat on the porch, blocked Paola's number, then Jake's, then his parents'. Deleted them all from my contacts. After the locksmith left, I turned off my phone completely, and for the first time in many years, silence fell in the house. Not an anxious one, but pure, pristine. I spent the next week alone. No calls, no emails, no internet. Just me, the fireplace, and the mountains outside the window, shrouded in morning mist. And it was the best thing that had happened to me in years. Returning to Denver the following week, I turned my phone back on, and the world, silent for a whole week, suddenly exploded with a flood of missed calls and messages. There were dozens, insistent beeps, anxious voicemails, fragments of despair, all mixed in this digital noise. Most were from Paola, a few from Jake, a few more from his parents. I didn't listen. I just selected them all and pressed delete. The screen cleared, as if I had erased not just the calls, but the very shadow of these people from my life. On Monday morning, I returned to the office. The air there smelled of coffee, paper, and confidence, the smell of my real life. The secretary brought reports, colleagues greeted me, some discussed deals, others joked. Everything was so familiar and reliable that I almost forgot I had recently been living inside a storm. Around lunchtime, the phone rang, a familiar number, the owner of the apartment building where Paola and Jake lived. His voice, usually calm, now sounded cautious. "Camilla, hello. I wanted to talk about your sister's apartment. I know you stopped the rent payments. That's your right, of course, but Paola and Jake are 5 days late on their payment. They aren't answering calls. I need to know what's going on." I replied calmly, without the slightest tremor. "They are no longer my problem. Follow the standard procedure. Late payment notice, then eviction notice. No extensions or exceptions." He was silent for a second. "Are you sure? That's quite harsh." I smiled. "They are adults. Let them figure it out themselves." And I hung up. When I returned to work, there was a strange feeling in my chest. Not a stone, not heaviness, but rather a lightness, as if I had taken off an invisible backpack I had been carrying for years. There was no guilt at all. Paola is 27. In that time, you can graduate from university, build a career, raise children, buy a house. And she was still looking for someone to fund her life. A few days later, sitting at my desk, I felt my phone vibrate, a social media notification. Paola had posted something. Curiosity overcame caution. I opened the app. The first photo showed her and Jake standing on the sidewalk in front of a house, among boxes and scattered belongings, clothes, kitchenware, even pillows lying right on the asphalt. They posed as if it were a scene from a tragedy, not life. In the second photo, Paola was sitting on the ground, her face covered with her hands, as if crying. The caption under the post was theatrical. "Thanks to my vindictive sister. My husband and I are now homeless. She took everything from us. For some people, family means nothing." The comments were full of sympathy. Crying emojis, angry faces, words of support. Some offered to take them in, others cursed me, though none of them had ever spoken to me. A few people even reposted her story, adding their own comments about cruel people who forget about family. I read it all with surprising calm. She had created an illusion again, as always, convincing, pitiful, advantageous. Not a word about 3 years of paid rent, not a word about the car, not a word about how she broke into my house and tried to call the police on me. Only carefully edited lies, served with the grace of a victim. I closed the app and returned to my documents. Let her play her part. She'll always have an audience. A few days later, a letter came from the bank. Formal, cold. The auto loan for the SUV, the one I bought for her. The payment hadn't been made and the car was repossessed. They sent warnings to her address, but of course no one responded. So they just came and took it. I sat in the kitchen, holding the envelope, and involuntarily smiled. Justice. By evening, Paula posted again. A photo of an empty parking space with the caption, "My car was just repossessed. My sister destroyed my life out of spite." Under the post, crowds of sympathizers. Someone even organized a fundraiser for a new car. I just smirked. "One mistake," she wrote. "Just one mistake. Yes, a mistake 10 years long." I didn't respond. No comments, no messages. I just closed the app. The next day, she posted another photo, a selfie in Jake's parents' living room. She looked exhausted, eyes red. "Now we're living with my husband's relatives. I sleep on the sofa and cook for them every day. This is what my life has become because my sister chose revenge over family." Again, sympathy. Again, a storm in the comments. I turned off notifications, not because I was angry, but because I didn't even want to see her performance out of the corner of my eye. My life, meanwhile, flowed smoothly. Work, clients, deals, trips. On weekends, I went to Aspen. The new locks on the house doors shone like a promise of peace. No one came uninvited, and the silence there was as pure as the mountain air. A week after the car was repossessed, I got a call, an unknown number. I hesitated but answered. The voice, trembling, muffled, almost breaking into a whisper. "Paula, how could you do this to me?" she began. "You ruined everything. We got evicted, the car was taken, we're living with Jake's parents, and it's a nightmare." I listened and felt emptiness. "That's not my problem," I said. Her voice rang with anger. "Not your problem. You abandoned us without warning." I laughed. "Without warning? 3 years of a paid-for life. That's a pretty good warning, don't you think?" She started screaming again, and suddenly I heard Jake's voice in the background. "What did you say about me?" Then, an argument, shouts, noise, the sound of something heavy falling, and silence. The call dropped. I put down the phone, poured a glass of wine, and for the first time in a long while, felt absolute calm. The next day, she posted again, a long rant about her life falling apart and me being to blame. But now the comments were changing. People started asking questions. Why had I been paying for them all those years? Why hadn't they done anything themselves? Gradually, the mask was cracking. 2 months passed. I worked, lived, laughed. Once at a coffee shop, I ran into an old acquaintance, Rachel. She had known us both since childhood. "Have you heard about Paula?" she asked. I shook my head. "She and Jake got divorced. His parents kicked her out. She has nothing." I just nodded. It all made sense. "Maybe you could help?" she suggested timidly. I looked her straight in the eyes. "I helped for 10 years. Not anymore." Rachel understood and fell silent. Another 2 months later, the phone rang again. Another unknown number. I was about to hang up, but something stopped me. "Camilla, it's me. Paula." The voice was quiet, broken. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I understand everything now. We're sisters. That has to mean something, right? I have nowhere to live, no job. Please, give me one more chance." I was silent for a long time. Then I said, "Let me give you some advice. Next time you need help, don't call me. Call the police. Maybe they'll believe you this time." She tried to say something, but I had already hung up. I sat watching the call disappear from the log and realized what I felt. Lightness. Real, liberating lightness. I had spent 10 years trying to pull up a person who never intended to stand on her own feet, spent $120,000, years of care, nights of worry, for someone who considered me a parasite. But now it was over. Completely. No more debts, financial or emotional. I was no longer someone's support, someone's victim. For the first time in many years, I belonged only to myself. I looked out the window where autumn Denver shone with gold and felt a quiet, confident feeling born in my chest. Freedom.